Hi, everybody. I'm Paula Harvey from Tejon Ranch Conservancy. And today we're going to have a lot of fun learning about systems and system models, part 3 in a 4-part series on making field guides. Let's get started. Here we go. So, part 3, we're going to make another field guide. You've already made a field guide showing patterns and showing cause and effect. This one is systems and systems models. Now that seems confusing, but it really isn't that difficult. In fact, it's a lot of fun. So let's talk a little bit about systems. So a system is a collection of parts which are interconnected, and they continually affect and interact with each other, and sometimes in unpredictable ways. A system can carry out functions that its individual parts can't. Think about the human body. There's lots of different systems. There's a digestive system, and there's a circulatory system. There's lots of different systems. Each system has a job, and in each system, there are parts. All together, you have a functioning human body. Now, to understand systems, the relationships between and among those parts have to be examined. So looking at things very deeply, we have to understand each of those parts, but also how do they interact with each other. And thinking of the natural features in nature as a system can help us think about the impacts and interactions that leads to the changes that we can observe. When we talk about things like climate change, we've got to look at the entire system that is our globe or our Earth. And so understanding these systems as a whole is very important as well. Studying systems is about studying those interconnections and those relationships. Now, models, system models, can be used to represent those systems and their interactions, such as inputs, the processes and the outputs, that's cause and effect, the energy and matter flow within a system. Models are limited, however, and can only represent certain aspects of the system that you're studying. And because of that, they can be used to predict an outcome, but sometimes the limitations to what a system model can do may affect the accuracy of that outcome. So when you're studying a system today, let's look at some of the questions you should ask yourself while you keep in mind that you're studying something interesting within a system. Ask about these things. What are the parts of that system? What are the boundaries of the system? How does that system work? And how do the parts of the system interact with each other? What would happen if a part was removed? And what would happen if a part were added? Those last two questions are about models. So, what is a system? They're all around us. They're simple, they're complicated, and everything that we deal with is usually in a system. So you can look at a tiny world, things on a lawn, or under a rock or a log, or on a rotting log, or in puddles. A system can be populations of organisms. For example, it could be a herd of animals, or it could be a hive of insects. And then parts of one organism, like a plant. Think about a tree, the roots, the trunk, the branches, the leaves, and the fruit. Those are all parts of a system. A community of different organisms. It can be a habitat, for example, like an oak woodland, or an ecosystem, a pond, a forest, a prairie. Systems are all around. So here's a little bit more information about how we investigate systems. You can investigate by looking at the adaptations of the species that lives there. For example, a hawk can fly, and it has amazing vision, so it can locate its prey. You can examine the flow of energy through that system. For example, a tree gets its energy from the sun, and some of that energy is stored in apples, which you or an ant can eat, and it gives us both nourishment. You can investigate a system by exploring the networks or webs of a system. For example, the grass that took up water does so through a network of roots. And you can understand the cycle of water, air, and other nutrients. For example, very simply, you ate that apple, you threw out the core, it's broken down by bacteria, and that makes more nutrients, which allows the grass to grow. Now, it's your turn to come up with a system that you want to study and make a field guide. You want to focus on systems and system models. Include 3 to 5 things in your guide. In this, it can be parts of a tiny world, or it can be 3 to 5 examples of something similar, such as maybe you're looking at the different parts of different plants. Arrange your page so that you show a drawing with words and numbers next to it, just like all of the other nature journaling you've done, and record your observations with words, pictures, numbers, ABC, 1, 2, 3, and a picture, and pay attention to the similarities and differences within that system or system model. Remember, always start with your metadata, the day, the date, the time, your location and habitat, the weather, and the percent of cloud cover, and add other things to it to make your metadata even more interesting. Are you with somebody? Add that person's name. There's something interesting about the weather besides temperature, wind, or cloud cover. Go ahead and add that. And remember, when you plan your page, start with your heading, the metadata, then a title, space to cover all 3 to 5 of your subjects. That may mean you're using 1 page or 2 pages or 3 pages, however many you want. This is your journal. Remember to include ABCs, 1, 2, 3s, and a picture. And then use the page afterwards as your reflection page for your questions and for your paragraph. Then remember, when you're done with everything, add those page numbers to your table of contents. Just a quick reminder, as I showed you on lesson part 2, remember that for each I wonder, you're going to want to write a hypothesis about what might be a possible answer to that question. So I wonder, yada, 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 could it be, and then answer it. Remember, it's just a guess. It's a hypothesis. So now you're going to plan how you're going to lay out your paper. So before you even start studying, once you've figured out what it is you're going to study, think about how many of those things you're going to study, and then set up your page. So here's mine. I'm using 2 pages. I've already put the metadata in. I do that all first thing before I even know what I'm going to study. I know I'm doing a journal entry now, so I'm going to fill that out. And then under the metadata, I put in a title. I also, on the upper right-hand corner, because I'm using both pages, I put a subtitle there that connects with that title. And then I drew in 5 boxes. Notice the one in the upper left-hand corner is smaller than the rest. There's a reason for that. I'm actually going to draw a mini landscape that shows what I'm studying. That just gives everybody a sense of where you are and what the place sort of kind of looks like. It helps to kind of complete this experience. Okay, so take a look at what came out of this. So the left side is where my metadata is and my title. Notice that the metadata is on the top. The title, Field Guide Systems and System Models. So I'm identifying what it is I'm studying today in terms of the approach that I'm taking. And then I include as well what system I am studying. So I'm studying a muddy puddle that's fed by a spring. Then I include my mini landscape, and notice I circled the area that I was actually studying within that habitat. And then I also remembered, while I'm studying systems, I have to keep thinking about system models as well. So I purposely added a question, and I actually did this at the end as I was thinking about all the things that I studied. At the end, I asked this question. This particular place that I chose to study is an area called an exclosure. And an exclosure is an area that's fenced off so that it excludes animals that might get in there. In this case, because it's on the ranch, it is excluding, hopefully, wild pigs and cattle. So they can't get in, and that allows everything to grow the way it's supposed to grow. It's a natural spring in that area, a seep of water coming through. And my question was, what would have happened if we hadn't put the fencing around that exclosure? And that would make me think further about creating a model to show what would have happened if that area looked like all the other area around it, which animals had access to. Would the water even be there? All right, and then notice I underlined all my I wonders. Could it be? I notice, this reminds me of, I underline those for you. Normally, if I'm just doing a journal entry for me, I wouldn't underline those things, but I'm doing it just to remind you that those are the way that you write your narrative. And then also notice that there are measurements of the animals that I'm studying. And then here's the second page. I continue on to the second page, and here's where my subtitle is. And then I added another subtitle talking about the fact that the 4 invertebrates, these animals, insects that I was studying, were just part of several other invertebrates in the area. And then when I got home, I did a lot of research. I wanted to identify what these animals were. I didn't know the names of any of these animals. So I did some research the best I could to try and study these animals. And I found a website that is called Help a Bee at UC Berkeley that identifies bees. And so my best guess was what kind of bee this is, and that it is, right over here I put it is a native bee. It's not an invasive or exotic European bee. And I only had so much space, but I actually learned lots more about each of these different insects as I was reading. And then same here, not completely sure I identified this beetle correctly, but look at this. There's 1,378 different species of this type of beetle in Southern California only, not in the world, just in Southern California. So I wrote a lot of those down. And again, I wonder, lots of those things have been written down. And so here is my finished journal entry. I'm really proud of it. It took me a long time. It took me a lot longer than an hour to put this together because I was really studying very carefully the anatomy of each of these insects. And then I did a lot of extra research. And that's the beauty of nature journaling. It gets you so curious that you want to answer lots of questions. And some of the questions I wanted answered, I didn't even write down. I had so many. So here's the thing about this. This is what I want to point out. I really planned this page out before I started drawing. Unlike this one where I started drawing and then I ran out of room and ended up having to move around. But in this case, I started with a plan. And as I did that, my finished journal entry looks very balanced, just enough of everything on one side or the other. So for example, this picture of this water beetle, it's really large, whereas this picture over here is really small. Those balance each other out, particularly because there's 3 things I drew here, 2 things I drew here. Overall, the look is attractive and balanced. So I'm thinking a lot now more about what is my finished product going to look like when I'm done, even before I do my drawings. And I've created these boxes, so I can't get too big or too small. I kind of have to fill it in. Here's a little artist's secret that I want you to notice. Just because I drew boxes doesn't mean I don't go outside the box. Look at this cool mud dauber wasp. Look at its antennae. They're actually outside of the box, as is this leg. And look here at my at my landscape, the trees go outside the box too. The box gives me some idea, some kind of a boundary, so to speak, but I can actually go outside the box, and it looks really cool when you do it. Actually gives it a little more three-dimensional point of view. This mud dauber is pretty cool. In fact, something I found out as I was doing my research, most wasps are parasites, well, a lot of them are parasites, meaning that they eat other animals. In this case, a mud dauber collects mud to make a nest, and then it lays its eggs in the nest. It lays its eggs in the nest and it provides for its offspring by collecting what it parasitizes, what it eats, and putting them in the nest. And what it does is sting that creature and makes it paralyzed, and then puts it in the nest so it stays alive. And then when the larvae start growing, they eat it alive. And I found out that this mud dauber wasp actually eats or feeds its young spiders. When I went to this mud area, this muddy area where all these animals were, there were spiders all over there. They actually, in a little nest, can put up to 25 live spiders that have been paralyzed for its babies, for its eggs. It was really interesting. And I knew some of this before, but actually, when I went online, I found photographs of nests that people have found and broken open, and they have the spiders inside the nest. It was really cool to do extra research on this creature. I particularly liked it because of this really interesting section right here that attaches its thorax, the middle part of its body, to its abdomen, the end of its body. And I still couldn't find out. And I had a question of why is that there? Why is it that long? Does it make it more flexible? I couldn't find out the reason for its length, but it's certainly a distinguishing feature. So now it's time for you to do yours. Think about taking about an hour, a little more maybe, to work on all of your studies. As I mentioned, my studies, and I did 4 of them, took me a lot longer than 15 or 20 minutes each, but I really enjoyed myself, so that was fine. I don't know, maybe 2.5 hours on the whole thing. So, but think about trying to do it within 1 hour and limiting your time to 15 to 20 minutes. And then when you're done, come back and take a look at the reflection questions. Have fun. Okay, so now you're back. Here are a reminder of how you do your reflection questions and how you turn them into a paragraph. Simple process. It may have seemed in lesson 3 to be a real labor to do this, but if you're using question answer form, I'm giving you the questions, half of your answer is already in the questions, you just pull out the right words. So question answer form, put as many of the words that are in the question into your answer. Reminder, what state do you live in? The state I live in is California. So using lots of those words, all you had to do is answer with one word, California, but you had to make a complete sentence. The words were already in the question. Answer all your questions and then put them in an order that makes sense to create a paragraph. Now, the order that I give you the questions may or may not be the proper order. It all depends on what your answers are. But remember to use all of the questions, or at least all of the answers to the questions, in your paragraph. Don't skip any of them. Always begin with a topic sentence, something that's very general so that the reader will know what it is that what your purpose was. And in this case, it would be something like, I created a field guide focusing on systems and system models. So we know what part of the NGSS, the Next Generation Science Standards, you're actually studying as you're doing this journal entry. And then finish with a closing sentence. Again, something that sort of wraps everything up. And I like to do it in a way that says, yeah, I had a lot of fun, or this was really hard, or I hope I don't ever have to do it again. I don't know, whatever, but something that ends. And I wrote, it was fun to hypothesize about the systems and system models of my subjects. Something a little generalized. Don't use that one, but you get the idea. That's just something that closes everything up. Don't leave us out in the middle. And by the way, one last thing to remind you of, don't forget, once you've written your paragraph, proofread it. You don't want to leave proofreading for the reader. You want to find all the mistakes that you made, that maybe you, oops, I forgot, I made the instead of they or whatever. But you want to, that's what I call stupid mistakes, things that when I'm writing really fast, I might miss it. I go back. I actually proofread by reading out loud. And then as I'm reading each individual word. And as I find those mistakes, I erase and fix them so that the person who reads your paragraph isn't your editor. And it shows respect to your reader that you took the time, that you really, and it shows respect to yourself, that you worked hard, you're proud of what you did, and you want it to be as close to perfect as you can possibly get it so that you can show yourself off to the person who's reading your piece. So here are your questions. What are the different things that you found? So in my case, I would say I was studying different invertebrates found in a mud puddle. Did you see any interactions or evidence of interactions between different organisms or between the organisms and the environment? Remember I told you the story about the mud dabber who eats those spiders that live all along that mud puddle? I didn't write that in my journal, but it's in my head. I would include that in that second question to talk about, well, I saw lots of these spiders and I saw lots of mud dabbers, but I didn't see an interaction with them, but clearly there was one. What are some other interactions you imagine might occur? Now this one, let me read it again. What are some other interactions you imagine might occur? So I'm looking at these insects. They've got to be interacting. They're either providing food for one another, or they're in some way getting along or not getting along while they're interacting. And I showed 4 different organisms, but there were quite a few more. So I would be able to talk about that. This is what you would predict using a system model. And so this one is important. What are some other interactions you imagine might occur? That would be if I added something to it or took something out, or how are they interacting? You're looking at models. What are the non-living factors that affect the organisms you saw? Well, clearly mud dabbers use the mud in those puddles, and there's water there. The bee that I drew was actually standing on top of the mud, but there's a little thin layer of water, and so it was sitting on the water. The bee is not getting pollen from the water, it's using the water. Those are the interactions: water, air, soil, things that are non-living. And then the last one, how might the organisms or the interactions between them be impacted if some of these environmental conditions were to change? Again, this is a predictive model. So we have one really huge issue facing our generation, and that is climate change. We have the heating of the atmosphere. How is that going to affect things? I asked that question, remember, in my journal. What would happen if that exclosure wasn't there? Would that mud puddle still be there? The water bug that lives in that mud puddle, you know, the other animals, they can get up and fly away. Maybe that beetle couldn't get away, so would it die? What about other organisms that are in that water? So that is this, again, a systems model question. So you have 3 systems questions and 2 system model questions. I love the system model questions because that's when you get to hypothesize. Use your imagination, take what you know, and come up with an outcome. So that's it for systems and system models. The last of our series on field guides will be structure and function. That would be a good one for that mud dabber. So the next time we're going to create another field guide talking about structure and function. So start looking around for interesting subjects you think you might like to study. So thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Bye.